So I read what feels like 10 million things about the Squid Game, and I succumbed and watched it a few days ago. So I'm not going to try and offer an analysis of it because honestly, I don't think it's worth anyone's time. But I do have a few thoughts that I want to share. The first thought being is that it has a very simplistic narrative that has been represented pretty well already in other movies and media. For example, Battle Royale, the Japanese movie with Takeshi Kitano, which is pretty famous, I think. I think this movie did a pretty good job at depicting the struggle and the competitiveness many students feel they face in Japan. And South Korea's education system, as far as I know, is pretty similar to Japan's. So if you haven't watched the movie Battle Royale, I highly recommend you do. I'm not exactly sure what the name is. I'm translating myself loosely from Russian, so I'm going to put the title down below into the description box. The second thing is that with simple narratives like the one the Squid Game is promoting, it really doesn't bring much new to the table. It is pretty much the reflection of the modern day reality presented in a satirical way. So satire is the exaggeration of what is happening, especially if it's about social ills. So works like the Squid Game is highly satirical because they represent what we already are living in, but in a somewhat exaggerated manner. There is a danger to simplistic narratives such as the one presented in the Squid Game because it promotes the sense of something happening, whereas in reality, nothing is, no solution is presented. And that reminds me of Fahrenheit. You tell me the number because I always forget the number. So this one scene where Mildred is watching this incredibly strange show where nothing is actually happening, the people are just arguing with each other, and Montag asks Mildred, who is his wife, why are the people arguing? What is happening? And she tells him to wait and see. And then there is an abundance of sound and an abundance of colors and flashing lights or something along these lines. And it feels like something grandiose is happening. And Montag feels like he's been shaken to the core, yet nothing ultimately happened. It was all just grandiose visuals and grandiose appeal to the senses. But in the end, nothing was solved, nothing was explained. So after the scene is over, Montag is still perplexed at what is happening in the show. But for Mildred, it's all good. She feels like something happened and therefore she's satisfied. And this is what I believe is happening with stories like the Squid Game. It feels like something grandiose is being exposed, yet ultimately there is no indication of what the problem is, because the problem there is not about how the people have succumbed to the circumstances. The problem is not that the people got into debt because they're unreasonable and stupid, etc. The problem of class antagonism is not highlighted, and the problem of rich people wanting to entertain themselves by observing poor people killing each other is ultimately kind of useless, because what does this accomplish? So we think that these rich people are bad? To me, that's not a message to take home. And many of the people did criticize the ending for being opened. I love myself a good open end, especially if it is thought-provoking and you're left with some food for thought. However, in the Squid Game, the ending is heavily hinting at the fact that the main character wants to change something about the evil status quo, yet he fails to deliver any kind of ideology or any kind of an idea. What is he going to fight against? Why? What has he realized through this journey? Yes, there's some hints dropped here and there, but usually with an open ending, you want to leave the audience with enough information to assume the character's motivation and to lead them, so to speak, to think about the following acts that the character may partake in a somewhat more meaningful manner. And this kind of an open end, like the Squid Game presented, it's a little lazy in my opinion. It kind of does the same thing a lot of the movies that are aimed at a younger audience, like the Hunger Games, do. It's feeling revolutionary and feeling like you want to undertake a task of struggling for a better life, yet you don't even understand what the problem is. You don't know what you're fighting against. You haven't analyzed the situation enough to understand what it is you're fighting against. So ultimately, it is like being a rebel for rebel's sake, and that is not what we want to stimulate people to think about if we want a meaningful change. Again, it is about feeling good. It is about instilling this thought of something happening and instilling this revolutionary spirit, which ultimately leads to nothing. Because, as I mentioned in one of my recent videos, feeling good is not on the agenda for any kind of a meaningful societal change at first, at least not in the first stages. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about this show. And I know that there is an argument that movies and TV shows like the Squid Game are just for entertainment only, and they're not meant to be deep and meaningful and teach the younger audience about the changes that need to happen in the society at large. However, I want to point out the fact that there is a possibility of creating something that is entertaining and that gives you a straightforward message that you don't need to second guess at, and that you don't need to make your own side story for. And I don't think that shows like the Squid Game deliver that. I think that they are pretty superficial, and the entertainment value of such pieces to me are quite questionable. I just remembered plenty more of those kind of stories that I've been exposed to at a younger age. Stephen King wrote a couple of stories that are very similar and that are very highly entertaining, yet they deliver something that I think Squid Game ultimately failed at. And those stories being The Long Walk and The Running Man. And these two books I read when I was in my teens, so some of the details may be blurry. I'm going to put the titles down below in the description together with my other recommendations, but I think that entertainment and something being made for entertainment's sake is not a good enough reason to make something that is convoluted and that doesn't really deliver much aside from some kind of visual value. But obviously that's just my 2 cents and my personal opinion, whatever that means nowadays, for the Squid Game. I don't think anyone should watch it. I don't think it's worth anyone's time, but you can let me know what you thought about it, and let's not keep this conversation going.